demonstrators make up the vast majority of Libyans.
2 days ago, have you seen thousands of people marching the streets and the squares? You saw them early in the morning? Yes. This is the real picture of Libya.
But even when announcing the return of captured Dutch soldiers, he allows himself a slight smile, a sign perhaps that confidence is high in the government camp.
So we captured the first NATO soldiers. We're sending them back home, but we're still keeping their helicopter, the armed helicopter.
On the ground, though, it's a confused picture. The tiny town of Bin Javid has seen fierce fighting and no real picture of who's winning. The jets still fly overhead as talk on whether to enforce a no-fly zone dominates the international agenda. Perhaps, though, Gaddafi's last words are his most telling.
Libya is not a piece of cake. We are not a Mickey Mouse.
Fighting words indeed. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera.
Well, Saif al-Islam also announced on Thursday the release of 3 Dutch Marines captured in northern Libya in February. He said Libya was sending back the NATO soldiers but would keep their helicopter. The Marines were caught trying to evacuate 2 European civilians. They'll be flown to Greece on Friday. The so-called no-fly zone and other tactics are still being deliberated by the international community. The Gulf Arab nations have jointly said they believe Gaddafi's government is no longer legitimate and have supported the no-fly zone. The African Union is rejecting the idea and has gone further by saying it doesn't support any form of foreign intervention. The US remains unwilling to take action on its own. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton saying an international consensus is needed. World leaders in Brussels are expected to issue a joint statement on Friday, pushing Muammar Gaddafi to relinquish power immediately. NATO has already sent warships closer to Libya's coastline, but debate continues over the no-fly zone. Alan Fisher reports.
NATO is not about to go it alone. Call from member nations for a no-fly zone in Libya have been getting louder, but the organisation's Secretary-General says 3 principles must be met before NATO can take action.
Firstly, there has to be demonstrable need for NATO action. Secondly, there has to be a clear legal basis. And thirdly, there has to be firm regional support.
The Americans want a United Nations resolution. The Russians want details of how a no-fly zone would work. Others just want some information.
It's always a difficult subject. I'm waiting to hear what will be said today. I don't have any preconceived ideas.
NATO would take the lead in any action to cripple Colonel Gaddafi's air defences and air force. But NATO and European politicians want support from the African Union and other Middle East countries, because the last thing they want is this to be seen as Western military action against an Arab nation.
We do not want to get sucked into a war in North Africa. We want to have freedom, we want to support peace, and therefore we have to decide careful and wise. And this means we always should think about the end of the development which starts now.
Military experts say they could have a no-fly zone above Libya up and running in 2 to 3 days. The politicians are the ones who first have to give the green light. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Brussels.
Well, further protests are planned across the Arab world for Friday. In Saudi Arabia, protesters are defying a ban on demonstrations and have called for a day of rage to press for democratic reforms. In Egypt, a peaceful demonstration is expected, calling for national unity between Egyptians following earlier clashes in the week between Coptic Christians and Muslims. In Yemen, protesters are expected to gather following Friday prayers, renewing their calls for President Ali Abdullah Saleh to step down. And in Bahrain, 7 opposition parties have called for a planned march demanding constitutional reforms. Protesters, too, in Iraq expected to take to the streets post-Friday prayers demanding better basic services and jobs. And in Jordan, anti-government demonstrators also due to gather in the capital Amman, demanding constitutional and legal reforms. Well, earlier in Saudi, security forces opened fire on protesters. They were defying the government ban on demonstrations by demanding reform and the release of political prisoners. The rare show of dissent was in the eastern city of Qatif, which is home to the kingdom's Shia Muslim minority and much of its oil wealth. Bernard Smith reports.
A second day of protests in the eastern Saudi Arabian city of Qatif. This footage is from YouTube and apparently shot on Thursday, although it can't be independently verified. What sounds like the crackle of gunfire comes from the distance. Saudi police are reported to have opened fire to disperse the crowd. At least 2 people were injured. This restive region is home to mainly Shia Muslims. Neighbouring Bahrain is 70% Shia and has been racked by weeks of protests. These scenes are just the sort of contagion feared by Saudi Arabia's Sunni Muslim leaders. And so, in a region where most rulers have extremely deep pockets, the Gulf Cooperation Council has decided to try and buy itself out of trouble. Bahrain and Oman are to benefit from a multi-billion-dollar aid package from their richer neighbours.
$10 billion for the Kingdom of Bahrain and $10 billion for the Sultanate of Oman. We believe that this is an ambitious program, but it also shows the strong support that comes from the GCC countries to the Sultanate of Oman and to the Kingdom of Bahrain.
In protests in Qatif on Wednesday, the crowd chanted "Down with the regime" and "No Sunni, no Shia, we are Muslim." But the Saudi Sunni leadership is deeply suspicious of the role of Shia powerhouse Iran. There is a call for protests across Saudi Arabia on Friday, despite an official ban. Witnesses in the capital, Riyadh, say riot police have started patrolling around shopping malls and main roads. Bernard Smith, AlJazeera.
Australian media are reporting leaked US diplomatic cables alleging Indonesia's president abused his power. The Age, an Australian newspaper, reported that Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono has been protecting corrupt politicians from prosecution. It also says he uses the country's intelligence service to spy on political rivals. The government is denying the reports, and the US ambassador to the country has just made a public apology. The African Union has endorsed Alassane Ouattara as the rightful leader of Côte d'Ivoire. After meeting in Ethiopia, the Peace and Security Council said Laurent Gbagbo must leave office in the interest of the Ivorian people. Gbagbo's representative at the meeting said the resolution was untenable. Well, the deadlock is hurting the economy. Côte d'Ivoire is the world's biggest cocoa producer, much of which is turned into chocolate. The export of almost 500,000 tons of cocoa beans has been held up. Now, the disputed President Laurent Gbagbo has ordered producers to get back to work or else. Mohamed Addo has more.
The Côte d'Ivoire's economy largely depends on its cocoa crop. But the farmers who will soon be gathering that precious harvest say they're now victims of the political battle engulfing their country. As the presidential face-off between Laurent Gbagbo and Alassane Ouattara goes on, each is issuing different orders to the farmers, and they're getting fed up.
Life is becoming more and more miserable for us farmers. Both Gbagbo and Ouattara should leave and let someone with